Hey guys, it's Van Diesel back again with another card fight Vanguard deck profile. So hope you guys enjoy. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and donate to the Patreon. And let's get this one started. Today's deck is Spectral Duke, Gold Paladin. I used to main okay, not main. Main is a strong word. I used to play Spectral Duke mainly because it was from the first Vanguard set I ever bought, mainly because I was trying to... Actually, no, I wasn't trying to puzzle that time. I was just trying to pull Spectral Duke, actually. And I got lucky enough to pull the original Vortimers, all three of them, followed by Spectral Duke himself. I pulled 2 copies of the Grade 1, 1 copy of the Grade 2, 1 copy of the Grade 3, and then 1 copy of the starter by some miracle. And I just decided to play with it ever since. And I like the aesthetic of Spectral Duke because I like restanding Vanguards. I like, I guess, the ideal of retiring units because... it was always the opposite feeling of Gold Paladin where they're supposed to call rear guards instead of nuking them. It was nice just to have that shadowy Paladin feel back to them. And now they're back, and I actually appreciate this. And Golds are my main clan, as you know, so I feel really happy doing this deck. So let's go ahead and get this one started. Today's starter is Spring Breeze Messenger because they couldn't reprint the original Vortimer. For the record, if they do, just, you know what to put as the starter. Grade 0, 10k shield, 6k base. Auto, when rolled upon, draw a card. Then if your opponent's Vanguard's a greater 1 or greater, you get a quick show ticket. So, you know, the standard draw that you always top deck off of, most likely. Followed by the quick show, which you can use to discard as discard fodder or stuff like that. It's always helpful, and it fits the aesthetic of this deck since, like, the first part of the ride chain will always reach the Knights, followed by the Dragon. For trigger-wise, we have 2 Foresight Courier as a draw, 2 Dantico as a front, 4 Knight of Heartful Forceful Fight, Nala's, which is also a front, and then 4 Halo Shield Mark as a draw PG. So 6 front, 6 draws. You need the... I won't say you need the front because at the end of the battle, since you're kind of nuking part of your board, you might have attacked with all of your rear guards in the front row first, and you might want to nuke those. So the chances of you having them for fronts are kind of slim. But you don't want to stack the crits on the Vanguard too much because you're only going to give them to the Vanguard at that point if the theory still holds up. And your Vanguard gets an extra crit anyways, so you might as well just run fronts in that regard so you can give more power if more things survive. Followed by the draw triggers, because since you're constantly nuking your board, and Spectral Duke does cost a counterblast, if you can't, like, use your skills to call down stuff from deck because it would cost your last counterblast, you can use the draw triggers to fill up your hand and then call more units down so you can pay the cost. So 6 draws, 6 fronts seems to feel nice, followed by the 4 heal of Elixir Sommelier. And now on to grade 1s. 2 copies of Little Battler Tron. 8k base, 10k shield, auto rear when placed, counterblast 1, and this unit gets plus 5k power at end of turn. And then auto Vanguard rear when an attack hits a Vanguard. If your Vanguard's grade is less than or equal to your opponent's, look at the top card and call it to rear. So I like that. It's an on place. You do have to pay counterblast, which in this deck is kind of meh on when it happens, but it will give you an extra 5 so it can hit force numbers, so that's always appreciative. But then also, Vanguard rear, if it hits, which most people won't let it hit, but I really like the fact that it gives on hit pressure, you get to look at the top card and call it to rear if your grade is less than or equal to the opponent, which is nice. It always adds like a very extra element of the early game, because whenever most people play, normally people will take the first attack you give them because they normally use the counterblast for maybe an early grade 2 rush or to quickly just like activate their skills so they don't have to do it later. I like Tron because of that. It just activates then and there, and since most people will take it, you get to call an extra card. It doesn't matter what the card's grade is, and you just get to do something with it. So 2 copies, you don't want too many of it, but you don't want too little of it either. Next up, we got 3 copies of Stronghold of the Blockchain's Hoel. 8k base, 10k shield, continuous rear. Your other unit in the same column as it, if it was placed this turn, gets plus 5k power. And if Advance of the Black Chain's Kaiden's on Vanguard rear, it gets plus 10k instead of plus 5. So that's good. Regardless, that's a free plus 5 to something. You can just call this down to back row center. Your Van's always going to get that plus 5. So it's like a 17k base. And if its skill is active, that's an 18k base if you're on Spectral Duke. And if Kaiden's on board, you get another 5, making it for a 15k drop just for a 1 to pass. So it's always nice to have, and even if you don't put it behind the Van, you can at least put it behind the rear so that it can hit more numbers before you kill it. So 3 copies. 4 copies of Listener of Truth and Drain. 7k base, 10k shield, auto rear, when placed by your card's ability, Soul Blast 1 to draw a card or countercharge 1, and this unit gets plus 3k power at end of turn. So either you get a free draw or you get a countercharge, which honestly comes up a lot more than you think it does, followed by the plus 3. I don't really use the draw skill that much because normally I counterblast a lot, and I like to use the deck very aggressively. So the counter charge normally comes in more, and you get a lot of hand cards with this deck. I say if your opponent survives 2 turns of Spectral Duke, depending on how hand heavy you went with it, you might be screwed. No more than 3. If they survive 3, you're definitely screwed. But if they survive 2, depending on what you did, you might be fine. So 4 copies, because she can always get you out of a pinch. 4 copies of Scout of Darkness Vortimer. 8k base, 10k shield, auto van. When placed, look at top 7 for a Spectral Duke or a Black Dragonite Vortimer from among them. Put it to your hand and shuffle your deck. And auto when you're retired by your opponent's cards. When retired from rear by your card abilities, put this card to soul and one of your vanguards gets plus 5k power to end of turn. So that's good. First off, it goes to soul, so you never have a soul problem with Din Drain. And second off, you get an extra 5k power to your vanguard, making it harder to guard, and it can hit more numbers easily. And finally, when placed on van, yeah, it's an on van place, but you get a free search of either your main grade 3 or your main grade 2, and you get to add it to hand for free without discarding. So, really hopeful there. And I just like this thing's art. It looks so beautiful. I've always been a fan of the Spectral Duke arts. Well, I never really liked the OG Spectral Duke art, but I liked his original support cards art, and I really like this thing's art. So 4 copies. Now into grade 2s. 2 copies of Lotbeer Shooter, 9k base, 5k shield. Auto hand at the end of the battle that your grade 2 or greater vanguard attacked. Counterblast 1, call it from hand to rear, and it gets plus 5k power to end of turn. So it's a 14k hitter. You got to pay a counterblast for it, but you basically get an extra attack out of it, and yeah, it's just a good thing to have. And if I'm correct, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure with the timing of how Spectral Duke works, since it's at the end of the battle that attacked, and this happens at the same time, I feel like you can use Lotbeer first to call it down, and then use this thing's skill. So if you only had 2 rear guards beforehand, and then you drag check Lotbeer, I'm pretty sure you can use it before you pay the Spectral Duke cost. I'm not so sure on that, but I might be right. But 2 copies, because you don't want... His main purpose is just to be called from hand during the battle phase, and you don't want too many of them, because he's going to be like a surprise card, but he does cost a counterblast. And you don't want too little of him because the surprise card, because your opponent might overguard something and think that it's not going to matter because they only have 1 attack left and I can just block that easily. So it's fine to overguard that and then just normal guard that, and then you call that down and then it screws them over later. So 2 copies. 3 copies of Advance of the Black Chains Kaiden. Pretty much here's what I've learned from playing this any form of Gold Paladin. If you run Hoel, you gotta run Kaiden at the same number. If you run one at 1, you gotta run the other one at 1. If you run that one at 2, you gotta run the other one at 2. It's just simple math. Auto 9k base, 5k shield, auto rear. When placed, discard a card from hand and counterblast 1. Look at top 3. Call 1 card from them to rear. You do not have a choice. Shuffle your deck, and if Stronghold of the Black Chains Kaiden is on your Hoel, is on your van or rear, draw a card. So that's good. You'd have to discard, you'd have to counterblast, but it's a free top 3 search. You call something, you shuffle, and if you called Hoel from it, if you didn't have it before, you get a free draw, or if you already had it on board, you get a free draw. And because of how the deck works, you could possibly call into something that activates when placed, so you can also use its on-place skill to do things like such as Din Drain, or maybe another card that also calls from deck. So all around, you can just enable combos, so 3 copies. 3 copies of Player of the Holy Bow, Vivian. 9k base, 5k shield, auto van or rear when placed from hand, unfortunately, so you can't combo him with the Kaiden. Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1. Look at top 3, call to 1 card, call a card from among them to rear, put the rest on the bottom of the deck in any order, and it gets plus 3k power on the turn. So it's a 12k base, so it can hit Excel and Protect grade 3s, and you get another unit, and the others go to bottom, so you can kind of shuffle your deck to hopefully get them back at top, or to Tentacle Default your deck standing with it. For some reason, every time I use Vivian, there's always a draw trigger and a front trigger, and the draw trigger is always the draw PG, and the front trigger is always Daunticle. I don't know why, but every time I use Vivian, that's always one of the top 3 cards. It's always those 2, and then the third card is either a trigger on some occasions, or it's an actual unit that I can call, but either way, I'm still losing 2 triggers. So 3 copies because she can prove helpful. And our last grade 2, 4 copies of Black Dragonite Vortimer, 9k base, 5k shield, continuous van or rear. If you have Scout of Darkness, Vortimer, and Soul, it gets plus 1k power, and auto retired by your opponent by your card's abilities. I don't know why I keep wanting to say your opponent's. Put it to Soul and countercharge 1, and then auto and wrote upon by Spectral Duke. Look at top 5, call up to 2 cards from them to rear, and shuffle your deck. God, that's a lot to unpack in one skill, but that's really good. It's got 3 different skills for the scenario. 1 is just a standard +1. It's not really that impressive, but that's a 10k base, making it hit force numbers, which is actually really good when you need that like early rush capabilities. And it's a rear guard skill too, which wasn't there prior in like the old ride chains where you'd only get it on Van. Now you get it on rear. And then when it's retired by your card's abilities, which granted is only Spectral Duke, you get to put it to soul to countercharge, so you have more soul, and you get to basically just do the skill for free, unless you count murdering the rear guard. Well, also, when it's rode upon by Spectral Duke, you get a free top 5 search, and you get to call 2 of them, and the rest go back to deck, and you shuffle. So, this card is straight up perfect. 4 copies, it's amazing. And on to grade 3s. 2 copies of Moxos Dragon, 12k base, no Excel Gift, Twin Drive, Auto Vanna rear, when it attacks, counterblast 1, call card from hand to rear, and this unit gets plus 5k power down to battle. So, 17k base, normally it's here for the same reason that Lapierre Shooter is. You attack with it, your opponent overguard and attack earlier, so you attack with this, call something else out, and now they're kind of screwed because now they miscounted and now they have to guard more, or they might not be able to guard at all, which is a good thing, but at the same time, it can activate on-place abilities during the battle phase, such as Kaiden's on-place ability, or Vivian's on-place ability, to get you more attacks. So he's always helpful. He does cost a counterblast though, so it's not that amazing, but he can get you more things, and he can hit for more power, so 2 copies. 2 copies of White Hair in the Moon Shadow Pelennor, 12k base, Excel Gift, grade 3, Twin Drive, Auto Hand. At the end of the battle that your rear guard's attack hits a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, counterblast 1, soul blast 3, write this card as standing, it loses 1 drive till end of turn. And then Auto Van, at the end of the battle that your rear guard attacked a Vanguard, counterblast 1 and bounce the unit that attacked to hand. I love this unit. I hated the fact that back in early V, when it was one of the first grade 3s to be revealed, I hate that no one ran it. I understand why no one ran it at the time, because the main problem with it is that you would most likely be playing an Ezel deck if you weren't playing an Ezel deck. Actually, I think Ezel was the only main grade 3. You could actually use that one minus for you. So, yeah, I guess at the time, Ezel was the only main grade 3, and you would constantly Soul Blast for Ezel, or not constantly, but you would Soul Blast a decent amount. And to get it off, you'd have to constantly re-ride, and you'd only get it off once during an entire game. So, Pelennor never really came in. You could use it with Garmor, but it wasn't that good. When the other Ezels came out, it just became less relevant, I guess, because why would you Soul Blast things that you need in Soul for? But then when Aggravate came out, with all the Soul stacking, you could feel free to Soul Blast 3, because you didn't really need to get Aggravate's main ability off, but if you wanted to, then yeah, you wouldn't use it. But now Spectral Duke came out, where you get a lot of Soul easily with the 2 Vortimer cards that you constantly retire, and it's not at 2 because of the Counterblast, and it's not at 2 because of the Soul Blast, and it's not at 2 because you lose a drive, because you actually get technically the drive back when you ride it. You get the Excel 2 and you get to draw. The reason why it's at 2 is because you have to get a unit to hit. And yeah, your opponent's going to obviously let the rear guards hit when your Vanguard's swinging for double crit and possibly a restand, and that's the problem. Because since you're most likely going to attack with the Vanguard last, because you want to maximize the amount of attacks you get out of it, you want to maximize the amount of times your rear guards are going to hit next turn. Because honestly, depending on what you have in your hand, I feel like you might just retire your front row more than your back row. Because your back row is more important, since next turn when you call down your front row, if you have back row units, at least the front row will hit. But if you don't have your back row units, 1, your opponent can just kill your front row, so you're minusing more than plussing. But 2, your front row units won't be able to hit unless they're on Excel circles, so you're going to have to waste more triggers from hand, or possibly just call down more shield, which is why I don't like him being at 4, because he would take up too much, and you don't want to see him too often because your opponent would most likely take out the worst possible timing for you. But he can still be a benefit to you, and you can bounce back units that you need to bounce back when your units attack and they fail to hit. So 2 copies, because he can be useful, but you don't want to see too many of him. Just use him wisely, but his art is cool. And finally, the card I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes or so, I'm not sure how long this video is going to be, Spectral Duke Dragon. 4 copies, 12k base, grade 3, Twin Drive, Excel Gift, beautiful ass art. Continuous Van, if you have a Black Dragonite, Vortimer, and Soul, it gets plus 1k power, so it's a 13k base, so it can hit force numbers now. And if your opponent's Vanguard's a grade 3 or greater, it gets plus 1 crit. Beautiful. that's double critical. That means every turn, Vanguard swinging for double crit. If they weren't going to guard it before because they wanted to risk it on damage triggers or they wanted to risk it so they can get counterblast, they ain't probably going to risk it now because it's 2 damage. So that's always helpful. And then auto van, once per turn. At the end of the battle that it attacked, counterblast 1, retire 3 rear guards, stand it, and it loses a drive until end of turn. And if your damage on is 4 or more cards, it gets +1 drive instead of -1 drive. And I like that about it. It's bringing back like the old limit break thing, where if you have 4 or more damage, the ability activates, you get an extra drive instead of losing a drive. So you're basically getting triple drive to replace the 3 units that you just killed. So that's always helpful to have. And it's only a counterblast, and if you just kill off the Vortimer cards, you're not really minusing anything. And it's the extra crit, so your opponent's probably going to guard both of them. And because you have drive checks for each of them, your opponent's probably going to drop a lot more just to make sure it doesn't pass. And if you get the triple drive off it, well, your opponent, if they don't have a PG, is going to be in for a fun time when they got to either take a double crit or go for like a 1 or 2 to pass. So 4 copies, because you can always add for that on-hit pressure. And gift-wise, we got Excel 1, which is, and Excel 2, both at 6, so I don't imagine you're going to ride more than 6 times. They both give you a new front row circle. Different is, Excel 1 gives that unit +10 during your turn. Excel 2 gives it +5 during your turn, but when Excel 2 is placed, you get to draw a card off it. So it's kind of the 50-50 on it. Excel 1, if you want to like rush down your opponent, like you know your opponent has a lot of, I guess, if you know your opponent's powerful and like adding up the hand will not help you, go Excel 1, rush them down. If you think that the game's going to be stalled on longer, go Excel 2 so that you know you can get your hand back when you're retiring your rear guards, so you can constantly push out as much rear guards as possible to get rid of the opponent's hand and make it less of a stall game. So 6/6, it can be either or. In the quick shield, it's a 5k shield basically, or to be more exact, when one of your units is attacked, give that attacked unit +5k power until end of battle. I know why it's not an actual 5k shield, but I wish it was considering it's actually called a shield. And that was the deck. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I like Spectral Duke. I know there are some builds that have, Agrovale and Percival in it, and I can understand why, because you're getting more gifts out of it. You're sending more stuff to soul and you're getting your units back, so it's harder for your opponent to kill them. My problem is with that, same as before, you're paying more counterblast now, and I don't like constantly paying more counterblast than I have to. And with all the drive checks you're doing, getting more Excel gifts might actually be a minus to you more than an actual plus, considering you might be decking yourself out closer. And as for Agrovale, I like its skill. It can give you +10. It's a free +10, and you can send stuff back to Soul to, use your Soul Pass cost later. But my problem with it is that I would have to get rid of some grade 2s that I prefer over Agrovale, and I'd rather have those grade 2s than I have Agrovale. But Agrovale with Percival along with this deck is not a bad idea at all, so if you want to go that way, you can. I just like this build. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, donate to the Patreon. My second channel focused on Beyblades in the description below. So is my Twitch channel, and I'm going to start streaming to that really soon, actually a lot sooner than I thought of this. So you can go follow that. And I have a Discord link, so if you want to chat on Discord, you can go join that. And I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to stand up your vanguards.